Soyons directs. Mark Carney est devenu le seul dirigeant du G7 à plonger son économie en récession. Il est le seul dirigeant du G7 à avoir 3 des 4 derniers trimestres négatifs. En fait, il est le seul dirigeant du G7 dont l'économie est plus petite aujourd'hui qu'il y a un an. Avant de commencer à trouver des excuses pour Mark Carney, laissez-moi vous poser une question simple. Si ce sont vraiment les tarifs douaniers ou les facteurs mondiaux qui sont à blâmer, pourquoi la France, l'Italie, l'Allemagne, le Royaume-Uni et les États-Unis ne sont-ils pas en récession? Ils font face tous aux mêmes défis, tous aux mêmes tarifs, tous aux mêmes facteurs mondiaux, mais c'est seulement l'économie de Mark Carney qui est en récession. Avant cela, M. Carney avait célèbrement dit à un journaliste, et je cite, « Regardez à l'intérieur de vous-même. » Si je pouvais m'adresser directement au Premier ministre Mark Carney, M. Carney, je vais utiliser l'une de vos expressions. Regardez à l'intérieur de vous-même. M. Carney, pourquoi vous êtes le seul dirigeant du G7 à avoir conduit votre économie en récession? Tous les autres pays du G7 qui font face aux mêmes tarifs et aux mêmes défis mondiaux que le Canada sont en croissance. Alors pourquoi votre économie, M. Carney, est en récession? Le seul en récession. Selon Statistique Canada, certains facteurs mondiaux ont aidé le Canada. En fait, l'augmentation dans le prix de pétrole a ajouté une croissance à notre économie. Donc, les facteurs mondiaux nous aident. Mais, malheureusement, cette aide a été annulée par des facteurs domestiques. Et c'est pour ça que le Canada est le seul pays en G7 en récession. On n'a pas besoin des excuses. Les excuses ne mettront pas de nourriture sur la table de 2,2 millions de personnes qui ont dû faire retour à une banque alimentaire. Les excuses ne ramèneront pas les emplois de 120 000 personnes qui ont perdu leur travail au cours des 3 premiers mois de cette année, lorsque le Canada est le seul pays en récession dans le G7. La vraie cause, c'est toutes les lois anti-développement que les libéraux ont adoptées au cours des 10 dernières années, qui sont toujours en place. La cause, c'est le doublement de notre déficit par M. Carney. La cause, c'est le fait que M. Carney dépense plus par rapport à l'économie que dans toutes les années, sauf que la COVID, depuis 1996. La cause, c'est la taxe carbone industrielle que M. Carney a augmentée 6 fois plus élevée. La cause, c'est que le gouvernement Carney bloque 500 projets économiques qui sont en attente pour des permis de construction. On n'a pas besoin des grands discours, des cérémonies de signature, un autre voyage. On a besoin que M. Carney revienne à la Chambre des communes pour renverser toutes les politiques économiques libérales qui ont livré la pire économie dans le G7 depuis 10 ans et qui nous rend le seul pays en récession aujourd'hui. On a besoin d'éliminer la loi C-69, l'interdiction de réduire les taxes sur le travail, la construction de logements, l'énergie et aussi l'investissement. C'est comme ça qu'on va libérer notre économie et permettre une vie abordable aux gens, des chèques de paie plus forts aux gens et de logements abordables pour les gens. C'est ça la vision conservatrice. Nous voulons encore instaurer la promesse du Canada, un pays qui est le plus riche au monde, un pays qui est abordable, un pays avec opportunité pour tous nos citoyens. Thank you very much for coming, everyone, now in English. I'm just going to be very blunt, because this is the fact. Mark Carney is now the only leader in the G7 to have plunged his economy into recession. He's been Prime Minister for 4 quarters now. The economy has shrunk in 3 of those quarters. He's the only G7 leader who can say that. The economy is smaller today than when Mark Carney became Prime Minister a year ago. He's the only G7 leader who can say that. He's been, Mark Carney will like to make excuses today. But let me ask him a question. But before I do, I'm going to actually quote back to him something he said to one of you. Mark Carney said to one of the journalists, "Rosie, look inside yourself." Well, I'm going to ask Mark Carney to look inside himself, and I'll ask him directly. Mr. Carney, if it really is global factors and tariffs that have given Canada the only recession in the G7, why have France, Italy, Japan, Germany, the United Kingdom, and the United States all avoided a recession? They all have the same tariffs and the same global factors, yet none of them, not one, is in recession. Only Mark Carney has the distinction of leading his country into a recession. Now, we know that there will be a lot of excuses today, but excuses will not put food on the dinner table of the 2.2 million people relying on food banks. Excuses will not get the jobs back for the 120,000 people who've lost them, as Canada has the 2nd highest unemployment in the G7. Excuses will not allow a young couple to buy a home, as Mark Carney has given Canada the worst housing costs in the G7. Excuses will not help the mother who is tossing and turning in bed at night wondering how she will make her mortgage payment, as Mark Carney has made Canada the most indebted household, given Canada the most indebted households anywhere in the G7. And by the way, Mark Carney will claim that this is just technical. There's nothing technical about having an empty stomach because you can't afford paying the worst food inflation in the G7. There's nothing technical about coming home from work and telling your kids that you no longer have a job and that they're going to have to sell the house because Canada has the 2nd highest unemployment in the G7. That is not technical, it is real. This is a full-blown Liberal recession. And it's not just 1 or 2 little data points that cause this, my friends. It is one of many data points that we see today. For example, in the last few weeks alone, we have fact after fact showing that the Liberal economy is collapsing. I'm going to quote from Equifax. Insolvency volumes have increased to levels not seen since 2009, up 19% year over year. Delinquency rates climbed 32% year over year. In the first quarter of this year, insolvency volumes hit a 17-year high, partly due to escalating financial strain on mortgage holders, and 1.5 million Canadians missed a minimum debt payment in the first 3 months of this year alone. Then there's the investment numbers, which came out just yesterday. They show that in the first 4 quarters under this Liberal Prime Minister, Canada saw $1.9 billion of investment flee. That's $20 billion more than entered our country. That's a net $20 billion leaving our country to build pipelines, mines, homes, bridges, technology in other countries for foreign businesses and foreign workers.
Shame.
Again, we cannot blame foreign factors for that because the other countries to which that investment fled are facing the same foreign factors. So no more excuses, please. We actually need results. Furthermore, we know that the Prime Minister is fond of doing illusions of action, but here is the core reality. After a year in office, what has really changed in our economic policy? Every anti-development law remains in place, C-69, C-48. He's increased the industrial carbon tax 6 times higher than it was when Justin Trudeau was in office. Home building has actually dropped, and in many provinces, the GST still applies to that home building. He's renamed, not eliminated, renamed the consumer carbon tax. And there are 500 economic projects waiting, some of them for years, just to get through the Liberal bureaucracy permitting system. Now, we know what won't fix this. Dazzling speeches at the World Economic Forum, clever-sounding corporate buzzwords, signing fake and unenforceable MOUs in grand halls with stately backdrops. None of these things will reduce costs or boost growth. Announcing projects that were approved many years earlier, or making pie in the sky promises like he's going to double electricity production 25 years from now with no details on how. All of these things are illusions. They give the impression of action, but in reality, all of the policies of Justin Trudeau remain the same, or they have gotten worse. The deficit is doubled, spending is higher. The only spending that has not gone up is capital spending, precisely the opposite of what Mr. Carney promised. The only way out of this Liberal recession is to reverse the policies that caused it in the first place. And that is why we are calling for the Prime Minister to get back in the House of Commons next week and introduce a bill to reverse all of the economic policies his party has introduced over the last decade. We don't need more photo ops, more signing ceremonies, more discussion papers. We need to reverse the Liberal policies that have given Canada the only recession anywhere in the G7. Conservatives have put forward positive plans to unleash our growth, including a real plan to incentivize the Americans to sign on to tariff-free trade, eliminating capital gains tax on reinvestments in Canada, ending the industrial carbon tax, in fact, cutting taxes on work, energy, home building, and investment, making Canada the fastest place anywhere on earth to get a permit, the freest economy in which to trade, work, invest, and get a return. Let's restore the promises of this country where anybody who gets out of bed in the morning can find a terrific job, a job that gives them a great paycheck, that buys affordable food and homes, where our young people can afford to start a family, where our parents can afford to give their children the best start, where our seniors retire in peace and tranquility, and where our economy is truly independent, self-reliant, standing on its own 2 feet. That is the mission. Now, let's turn it into action. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now take questions from reporters. Please identify yourself and your outlet. One question each.
Je peux commencer. Oui, bonjour, M. Poilievre, Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. C'est un article qui vient de tomber ce matin. Le Wall Street Journal rapporte que l'administration Trump veut que les véhicules couverts par l'ACIUM, donc avec des tarifs moindres ou exempts de tarifs, aient au moins 50% de contenu américain. Est-ce que c'est une demande acceptable d'après vous?
Non, j'ai déjà proposé un plan positif pour éliminer tous les tarifs douaniers sur les autos qui va obliger les producteurs de produire une auto aux États-Unis pour qu'ils vendent aux États-Unis et une au Canada pour chacune qu'ils vendent au Canada. Comme ça, on va pouvoir augmenter la production d'automobiles dans nos deux pays massivement pour renverser les déficits commerciaux que les deux pays ont maintenant. Donc, c'est ça la seule façon qu'on va pouvoir éliminer les tarifs entre le Canada et les États-Unis. M. Carney a baissé les bras et il a fait rien. Il n'est pas à la table de négociation lorsque le Mexique est là. Et à cause du fait que M. Carney est absent, maintenant nous voyons des menaces plus dangereuses par rapport à notre secteur d'automobile. Il n'y a aucun futur pour notre secteur automobile sans un accès direct et sans tarif aux États-Unis. C'est pour ça que j'ai présenté un plan il y a à peu près 3 mois pour sauver le secteur automobile et en fait pour renverser le déclin qu'on a vu depuis 10 ans au Canada. M. Carney n'a absolument rien fait depuis ce temps-là, sauf que faire des grandes contradictions. Hier, il a dit qu'il veut et je cite, Make America, dans ses mots, great again, après avoir dit qu'il voulait une rupture avec les États-Unis. Donc, c'est un autre grand échec pour Mark Carney et peut-être c'est l'une des raisons pour lesquelles le Canada a la seule récession parmi les pays du G7. Yes, well over 3 months ago, I presented a plan for tariff-free auto trade with the United States. Bring back the 1965 Auto Pact, which would massively increase production in both Canada and the United States, and actually achieve the stated goals of both countries. Since that time, Mark Carney has been nowhere and done nothing, while the Mexicans are at the negotiating table eating our lunch on auto negotiations. Mark Carney has not shown up for one negotiation so far. The result is that our auto sector is hemorrhaging jobs under his leadership. In the last 10 years, we've lost half of our auto production, and now we're losing even more. But because Mark Carney has done literally nothing to fight for tariff-free trade on autos over the last decade, we've lost even more auto jobs. And one of the facts that the Statistics Canada reported that led to us being the only country in the G7 in recession is the decline in the auto sector. Yesterday, Mark Carney gave a baffling, confusing, and contradictory speech in which he simultaneously said we need a rupture with the United States and that we need to make America, in his words, great again. So his elbows are up and down so fast he's doing a rhetorical chicken dance while we lose our auto sector.
Hi, Mr. Poilievre. Rahim Ahmed from the National Post. Mr. Poilievre, you said that you'll be campaigning across Alberta for a united Canada. Can you give us an update on any visits that you have scheduled back home in the next few weeks? And are you open to debating folks like Keith Wilson and some of the other prominent Alberta separatists?
We will be back in my home province of Alberta to campaign for a united country. And our message is that all of Canada needs to wrap its arms around Alberta. Let's ensure that every Albertan knows that Canada loves Alberta, that Canada is Alberta, Alberta is Canada. We need to have a strong, united nation right across this country. And that will mean a stronger province of Alberta, but getting out of the way and off the backs of our energy sector, getting rid of the gun grab, locking up criminals to bring safety to our streets, allowing young Albertans to start families with affordable homes, decentralizing control in the country so that Albertans have more direct decision-making power within their provincial boundaries. That is a positive, optimistic, unifying vision that I will be presenting to all Albertans in all corners of the province.
Monsieur Poilievre, le ministre chinois des Affaires étrangères est en ville aujourd'hui. Il a dit ce matin à Anita Anand, la ministre canadienne, que si le momentum continue, les échanges commerciaux pourraient augmenter de plus de 100% d'ici 5 ans et que le marché chinois demeurait ouvert au Canada et qu'il deviendrait bientôt le plus grand marché mondial. Comment pensez-vous que ça sera reçu aux États-Unis? Quel est le risque aussi au Canada?
Mais tout d'abord, M. Carney est directement dans un conflit d'intérêts. Lui qui est allé en Chine pour recevoir un prêt de 200 millions de dollars d'une banque contrôlée par l'État chinoise quelques mois avant de son entrée en pouvoir. Il a toujours des investissements à Brookfield qui veut élargir ses affaires en Chine. Il a déjà permis Brookfield d'être à la table des discussions et pourparlers en représentant le Canada. Ça n'a jamais été arrivé qu'un premier ministre envoie son entreprise pour faire des pourparlers. On veut un premier ministre qui défend les intérêts du Canada et non pas de son entreprise. Évidemment, dire qu'on peut on peut remplacer les États-Unis avec la Chine, ce n'est pas réaliste quand on vend 20 fois plus aux États-Unis qu'on vend à la Chine. Et c'est peut-être l'une des raisons pour laquelle le Canada est le seul pays en récession parmi les pays du G7. C'est un autre mauvais calcul de Mark Carney, un homme qui a tort sur toutes les questions économiques depuis une décennie et avait tort sur la taxe carbone, sur les plans de garder tout le pétrole dans la terre, son opposition au pipeline, son support pour l'impression monétaire. Il a tort sur toutes les questions économiques depuis une décennie et on voit qu'il a tort encore sur les questions mondiales. Yeah. Of course not. He won't do anything to make Beijing unhappy. A year after Mark Carney said that China was the single biggest risk to Canada. He claimed that we were going to have a full rupture with the United States in favor of a strategic partnership for a new world order with the dictatorship in Beijing. Of course, Mr. Carney is in a terrible conflict of interest. He went and got a $200 million loan for his company from a state-backed Chinese bank while he was the economic advisor to Justin Trudeau. That loan is still owed, my understanding is, by Brookfield, which the Prime Minister continues to be invested in. He allowed Brookfield to be at the table for discussions. So Mr. Carney has got to be clear that he should represent Canada's interests, not his corporation's interests. We want, and maybe one of the reasons why Canada is the only G7 country in recession right now is because he is miscalculating on trade, just like everything else. He's been wrong on every economic question over the last decade, and Canadians are paying the price. He was wrong on carbon taxes, wrong on keeping half our oil in the ground, wrong to oppose a pipeline to the Pacific, wrong to support money printing inflation, and now he's wrong in his trade priorities. We sell 20 times more to the United States than we sell to China. That's just a mathematical fact. And Mark Carney's Brookfield interests in China won't change that. We need a prime minister who's fighting for our workers in this country. We should have the best economy in the G7, not the worst.
Sorry, Mr. Poilievre, just to jump back to the economy real quick. In Q3 2025, the economy grew at an annualized rate by 2.6%. We have economists saying that today's numbers are so nominal they could be forecasted away and revised away. So aren't you jumping the gun a little bit, calling this a full-blown recession? Right.
So I know that there's a lot of excuses being made for Mark Carney today, and I'm not surprised. By the way, which outlet are you with?
The Hill Times. Is 2.6% economy growth an excuse, or is that just the numbers?
It's actually, there's no 2.6% economic growth. The economy, if I could. So you're having to go back? How many quarters are you having to go back now?
2 quarters.
So you're having to go back. Okay, so let's get this straight. There's been 4 quarters since Mark Carney became Prime Minister. The economy shrunk in 3 of those 4 quarters. Canada is the only G7 country for which that is the case. There's now been an entire year of Mark Carney that is recorded in economic data, and the GDP is smaller today than when he took office. That is only true of Canada among G7 countries. And now there are 2 back-to-back quarters where the economy shrunk, which is the literal definition of a recession. Canada, and by the way, it's not just that our economy is shrinking quarter after quarter. It's that we have the second highest unemployment in the G7. You think that the 120,000 people that lost their jobs since the beginning of this year call this just a technical recession? No, they call this real job loss. And then you have the delinquency rate that is up 32% year over year at 17-year highs. We have the highest household debt of any country in the G7, the worst housing costs of any country in the G7. For most of the last year, the worst food price inflation of any country in the G7. So yes, you are making excuses and trying to hide from the reality that Mark Carney has given Canada the worst economy in the G7. And it's time to stop making excuses, not for political reasons. It's time to stop making those excuses because this is people's lives. Behind these statistics are empty stomachs, empty fridges, and empty bank accounts. Behind these numbers are 120,000 people who have come home to their kids saying, we can't have you registered for hockey this year. We have to sell our home. I don't know what we're going to do. That is the reality of Mark Carney's economy, and it's trying to stop covering it up with illusions.
Good afternoon, Pierre. Pierre. So, Pierre, on national defense, Pierre.
I will get your question, but I just have to get this.
On national defense, yesterday, CANSEC, the conference concluded, and both of your former colleagues, Aaron O'Toole and Peter MacKay, sang praise of the government's shift of national defense policy under Mark Carney's leadership. What do you make of the shift of that national defense strategy and procurement specifically? And also, do you believe you're losing ground to Mark Carney on an issue like national defense to the progressive conservative flank of your party?
No. We've seen as a lot of illusions from Mark Carney, a lot of spending on bureaucracy, on procurement, and on consultants. A lot of big corporations will get very rich The problem is that the money is not reaching the equipment in the hands of the soldiers. We 100% support more military spending, but we want to turn that spending into better equipment and better results for our soldiers, not more expensive bureaucracy, more confusing procurement, and more profits for multinational defense contractors.
So the Chinese delegation is exerting influence over Carney's office, allowing which reporters can come into the meeting, who can even ask questions, who are not allowed to do, even though this is our own term. What do you mean?
I think it's very troubling. I mean, the question for those who couldn't hear is that Mr. Carney has decided to protect the minister from Beijing by not allowing media to enter the room and only to release state photography of the meeting. That's how things are done in Beijing. And now Mark Carney is importing those methods here. Even one Liberal commentator on CBC, Althea Raj, said that Mark Carney has an authoritarian streak. But I would remind him that he's supposed to work for Canadians, not for Beijing, not for Brookfield and its Chinese investments. And he should open up and actually take questions from the media, like I'm doing here today. And by the way, he should actually show up in the House of Commons and answer questions there. We see that Mark Carney can't take difficult questions because his illusion shatters under any scrutiny. But that is not how Canada works. We are a free and open democracy, not an authoritarian state. Oui, je trouve ça très inquiétant que M. Carney interdit les médias de prendre des photos et de poser des questions. Il essaie d'importer des protocoles du régime, de la régime à Pékin, ici au Canada. C'est pas démocratique. Il y a certains commentateurs de CBC qui ont remarqué qu'il a une tendance autoritaire et maintenant il l'utilise pour favoriser la dictature de Pékin. Moi, je rappelle à M. Carney qu'on est une démocratie au Canada. On travaille pour le peuple canadien et non pas pour les chefs à Pékin.
Thank you. We have time for one last question.
That we are an independent and sovereign country. We should be willing to talk and trade with China. It is a brilliant civilization with hardworking, decent people, but we have to do so with our eyes open. This is a dictatorship that Mr. Carney himself acknowledged was the biggest threat to Canada only a year ago. And our interests in Canada are in being sovereign, self-reliant, and standing on our own 2 feet, ensuring that we have full control over our technology, our economy, and our minerals, so never will we be vulnerable to the aggressive instincts of a foreign dictatorship.
Do you support privatizing Canada's airports?
We've not proposed that. We think that the government should focus on reducing the cost of government spending and should unleash free enterprise so that our small businesses, our workers, our investors can make Canada the richest and most affordable country anywhere on earth. One more question.
The government's put out an article on AI this week, and we know that the Prime Minister went to recent strategies too. I'm just wondering, how in your view should the government balance using AI instead of using?
That's a very good question. First of all, we should allow the savings that come as a result of AI to be passed on to consumers. They should not be inflated away through more money printing. Second of all, we cannot allow the government to use high-tech companies as a surveillance arm of the state. That's why we're fighting against the changes proposed in C-22. We're very worried about excessive government power for surveillance and for control of the population. We need to have a free and open society where Canadians can use the tools that AI offers to make their lives affordable, empowered, make their paychecks bigger, and their lives less complicated. At the same time, we need to make sure that the government does not abuse that technology for its own control. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Oui, 3 victoires, l'une après l'autre, jusqu'à la Coupe Stanley. Go Habs, go.